Why you feel unmotivated. The truth about dopamine and dopamine detox. Hello, welcome back to Mastering Life. Have you ever wondered why you feel unmotivated some days, even though nothing is really wrong? The answer lies in the dopamine system of your brain. In today's video, we'll analyze how dopamine works, why we feel less motivated due to overstimulation in our daily lives, and how a dopamine detox can help. Let's explore the scientific background behind your brain's blockage. What is dopamine and why is it essential for survival? To understand why you feel unmotivated today, we first need to grasp what dopamine is. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, essentially a chemical messenger in the brain that plays a significant role in motivation, pleasure, and reward. Evolutionarily, dopamine was crucial for survival. It drove our ancestors to do things necessary for survival, like finding food, seeking shelter, and reproducing. In fact, we need dopamine to function, almost like a computer needs power to operate. Dopamine is like the battery that drives and motivates us. When our ancestors consumed calorie-rich food or had the chance to reproduce, their brains released dopamine, signaling that they had achieved something important. This reward system encouraged them to keep going. But the most interesting aspect of dopamine is that it not only rewards you after you achieve something, it actually rises beforehand to motivate you to act. It's what brings you closer to your goals. Why dopamine peaks make you unmotivated? Today, we are still programmed to chase dopamine, but the way we obtain it has changed. Instead of hunting for food or surviving in harsh environments, we are surrounded by instant dopamine sources, like social media, junk food, video games, and notifications on our phones. These rapid artificial dopamine spikes cause much more extreme dopamine releases. Every time you experience an extreme release, such as when you check your phone and see a new notification or eat a sugary snack, your dopamine level shoots up, sometimes far above your natural baseline. But here's the catch: the bigger the spike, the bigger the subsequent crash. After these high dopamine peaks, your dopamine level falls below your natural baseline. The greater the rise, the greater the fall. If you continue to rely on these intense peaks over time, your baseline dopamine level begins to drop. This means that everyday activities like reading a book, going for a walk, or doing chores that used to give you a little dopamine boost no longer feel rewarding enough. Think of it this way. Every time you face a decision, like, should I read a book or scroll through my phone? Your brain makes a decision based on dopamine. If you chase large dopamine spikes through things like watching TV, junk food, or social media, activities like reading or completing daily tasks won't feel satisfying enough. The dopamine boost from these healthy activities is so much lower compared to the instant high from overstimulation. And that's why you might feel unmotivated today. Your brain has gotten used to chasing ever greater dopamine spikes. At the same time, your baseline dopamine level has fallen so low that your battery for everyday healthy activities is drained, and without a strong reward, it no longer seems worth it to engage in these activities. The science of dopamine, baseline, and motivation. Let's dive deeper into what happens to your dopamine baseline. Your brain has a resting dopamine level. This is the amount of dopamine you naturally have when you aren't doing anything particularly exciting. When you get a dopamine boost from something rewarding, like watching TV or eating something delicious, your level temporarily rises above this baseline. Now it gets tricky. The higher the dopamine boost, the deeper the subsequent crash. So, if you're constantly chasing those high dopamine spikes, like binge-watching or endlessly scrolling on your phone, your dopamine baseline starts to drop. This makes it harder for you to find motivation for things that don't provide a big, immediate dopamine boost. That's why you may feel unmotivated to do everyday tasks like working, studying, or even exercising after spending hours on social media or eating junk food. These activities just don't seem to provide the dopamine boost you've become accustomed to. It's a cycle where your brain starts to crave larger and more frequent dopamine spikes to feel good. The difference between healthy and unhealthy dopamine sources. But not all dopamine spikes are bad. You can also get dopamine from healthy activities like exercising, learning, or achieving long-term goals. The difference is that these activities tend to release smaller, steadier amounts of dopamine and don't cause massive spikes. After a good workout, for example, your dopamine may rise, but it won't peak as high as after a junk food binge or scrolling through social media. The advantage of these smaller, steadier dopamine releases is that they don't lead to the same deep crashes or decrease your dopamine baseline. Instead, they help maintain a healthy balance and keep you motivated in the long run. It's important to remember, without dopamine you cannot live. We need it to function, stay motivated, and seek rewards. The key is to make conscious decisions about where we get our dopamine. Are we chasing quick, artificial spikes that make everyday life seem boring in comparison? Or are we finding balance by sourcing dopamine from activities that enhance our lives in the long run? The dopamine detox, resetting your motivation. So how can we free ourselves from this cycle of dopamine addiction? Here comes the concept of a dopamine detox into play. The idea isn't to eliminate dopamine, because we can't, but to reset your brain's reward system by taking a break from these high-intensity dopamine spikes. By temporarily cutting out things like social media, junk food, and other overstimulating activities, you allow your brain to recalibrate. This helps raise your dopamine levels back to a healthier range, making everyday activities like reading, exercising, or spending time with loved ones feel rewarding again. During a dopamine detox, focus on low-stimulation activities like reading, walking, meditating, or journaling. These may not provide an instant rush, but over time they help restore balance, and your brain will become more sensitive to smaller, healthier dopamine boosts. To sum up, dopamine is essential for motivation, but in today's overstimulating world, our brains are constantly chasing ever larger dopamine spikes. The result? Our dopamine baseline drops, making it harder to stay motivated and enjoy everyday life. By rebooting with a dopamine detox and choosing healthier dopamine sources, we can retrain our brains to find joy and motivation in the things that truly matter. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Mastering Life, and click the bell for more content on mastering your mind, motivation, and life. Remember, you can control where your dopamine comes from, and that's the first step toward mastering your life.